Okay, my friends, so we're currently editing my second book titled Dying with Regrets. We're doing it and we're doing it now live. So thanks for coming along the journey with me. Let's get started. So what we're going to be doing now is editing the next chapters. This one that we're starting right now is called Getting Shit Done. Over the next coming days, I have memories of friends and family visiting me with huge smiles on their faces. They were chatting to me as I sat there upright, but I was unable to respond due to the tracheostomy which was in my throat. Feeling very lethargic, I would always try my hardest to smile back at them and put my thumb up. A few days later, I had my first vivid memory of being in the intensive care unit, which was the same day I fell out of the bed. My mum and grandparents were at the hospital beside me all morning, anxiously waiting for me to wake up. I remember opening my eyes and being greeted by their beaming faces. They sat and talked for hours asking me different questions, which I would reply to by pointing at different letters on a wooden speaking board. At one point, I began to spell out the words SHIT. My mum thought I was just being rude, so asked me what I was trying to say, and I started to mouth out the words SHIT. My nan soon realised that I wanted to use the bathroom, so she decided to go with my granddad to grab some hot drinks, whilst my mum went out of the room to inform the nurses of my rude request. As I sat there bolt upright and slightly delirious, the urgency to use the toilet was becoming more and more urgent, so I began to press the call button on the remote that was attached to the side of my bed. As I looked out of the door, I saw a nurse walk by and give me the greatest grin. So I pressed the button once again, and to my surprise, she walked back past and smiled at me again. Little did I understand that she was preparing everything for me. So for the very last time, I pressed the emergency help button, and as I sat there in desperation, I watched the kind lady who I thought was ignoring me pass the doorway once more, and right there and then I decided to take drastic action. I decided that I would walk myself to the toilet, wherever that may have been. Unaware of my lack of mobility, I dragged one leg off the side of the bed and also the other, and then using all my strength, I pushed myself up and off the side of the bed, where my numb legs instantly gave way. As I hit the floor, I also took the ventilator breathing apparatus, heart rate monitors and IV lines with me, and the machines began to make a tremendous noise as I lay there dangling on the hospital floor. Thankfully, a smartly dressed surgeon rushed in and picked me up, then placed me back in my bed. He was shouting and ordering all the nurses to come in and sort me out, and as they frantically fixed the mess I was in, I remember seeing my mum's face come into the room, and she was confronted by all this commotion. She was instantly ushered right back out, and the curtain was swiftly pulled around my bed. They told my mum there had been an accident where I had managed to fall out the bed, so my mum was completely confused and absolutely petrified. She had only been gone for 2 minutes. After the unpleasant task of putting the tracheostomy back in my neck was complete, my family came and asked me, "What on earth were you doing?" Thankfully, I wasn't too sore and managed to laugh it off, but I still had to explain the whole situation to my loved ones by playing a game of charades with them. I will let your imagination decide how that game went. This wasn't the only time I had a mishap in hospital. It was several days later when they moved me to the high dependency ward, where I was surrounded by others who had faced some sort of life-threatening trauma. I remember having flashbacks of my attack one night, and as I was having this horrible nightmare, I could suddenly hear a loud noise of a helicopter and someone repeatedly screaming, "Help me! Help me!" It felt like the world was ending, so I shot up and in bed, absolutely petrified, sweating, with my heart rapidly palpitating. After I managed to calm myself down, I realised it was just a dream, and that my room was next to the helipad landing, and the horrific screams of "help me" were coming from someone in a ward down a corridor, who I soon realised couldn't control his shouting every single night for another week. The next day, when the porter passed in front of me, he asked if I would like tea or coffee, and I nodded my head to a coffee. I'm not sure why, as I didn't even like tea or coffee. And as soon as he passed the boiling beverage over to me, I unconsciously took a huge gulp of the scalding hot coffee. Instantaneously, my mouth bubbled and blistered, and as I sat there in pure pain, whilst waiting for my parents to arrive. When they arrived later that morning, I had to play yet again another game of charades with them to explain this second situation. That was a crazy time, my friends. Literally falling out the bed was crazy. Imagine that. It would have been on the local news. Boy survives brain injury after being attacked, but died after needing a shit and falling out of his bed. That's not in the book, by the way, but maybe I should put that in. Let me know what you think. Okay, next chapter. I'll read one more. Is it me? As the days went by, doctors and nurses encouraged me to start trying to bend my legs more. This took me some time, but only up until the point where I was able to stand at the side of my bed. One sunny morning, my friends and family all came to my bedside with gifts, but I had a much greater gift for them. As they surrounded my bed, I told them I just needed to use the bathroom. Then as they went to walk away and give me some privacy, I stood up, grabbed my Zimmer frame, and slowly took off towards the bathroom, which was about 10 steps across the ward. I made it to the bathroom door. I grabbed the handle and I went in. After I finished peeing, I turned to my left and began to wash my hands. But this next part was one of the most surreal moments of my life. Have you ever had that strange sensation of somebody staring at you? Well, whilst I was washing my hands, I could feel someone staring right at me. So I began to slowly raise my head in the dark restroom, and I noticed that there was a mirror. I noticed that in front of me was a mirror. Slowly looking up, my eyes soon made contact with the eyes of a thing in the mirror, causing me to look straight back down into the sink. My mind couldn't absorb what it had just seen. Yet again, it was information overload, and as I looked back down, I closed my tired eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared myself for what I was about to witness. Again, I slowly looked up, and when I came face to face with the reflection, a mixture of emotions took over. Let me just reread that. Again, I slowly looked up, and when I came face to face with the reflection, a mixture of emotions took over. I was sad, scared, and completely confused. This couldn't be real. I saw the reflection and was baffled because it wasn't me. The feeling of looking... It wasn't me. I'm going to change that to italic. Italica, what do we call it? How do you say? Italic. I saw the reflection and was baffled because it wasn't me. The feeling of looking at a mirror and seeing someone other than myself was such a heartbreakingly scary experience. The first thought that came into my mind was Frankenstein. And up until this point, I did not know the real severity of my injuries. I stared into the mirror and examined the reflection. Pasty skin, skeletal features of the face, one eye fully open and the other eye half closed and pointing towards the sky. A clear plastic sticker covering a huge hole in its lower throat. half a head of long hair, the other half bald with staples stamped into its skull running from the upper front all the way down to the top of the earlobe. My heart suddenly sank as it became apparent that this thing was in fact me. Let me just reread that. My heart suddenly sank as it became apparent that this thing was in fact me. This was the very first time I had seen myself since the night out prior to the attack. I couldn't comprehend the damage that had happened to me, so I gripped the sink and then bawled my eyes out as I stared at myself. It was horrible. I cried my eyes out for about 10 minutes, remembering exactly what had happened to me. After this hard realization, I remember shuffling back across the ward to my bed, and I could feel everyone's eyes focusing directly on me. They all wondered what had just happened, and as I lay back down in my bed, they all asked me, "What's wrong?" I replied with, "It's me. I look horrible." My mum instantly began to cry, and everyone tried to comfort me and tell me that I looked fine. I really didn't feel fine after seeing that dreadful sight, and that very same night I remember yet again crying myself to sleep with that mirror image ingrained in my battered brain. Over the next week I began to make rapid progress. I went from struggling to walk on a Zimmer frame to walking on crutches within a couple of days, and towards the end of the week I was walking down to the cafeteria with my loved ones whilst using the crutches. I remember that weekend we all went for a walk down to the cafe, and I began to speed up and walk off in front. My mum was pleading that I slowed down, but I ignored her and off I went. I then lifted the crutches off the ground as I paced down the corridor, and then I got to the end and lifted... I lifted the crutches off the ground as I paced down the corridor, and then I got to the end and lifted the crutches right above my head and shouted the words, "I can walk again." Doctors then told us that they were transferring me to a hospital much closer the very next day. My parents were unsure whether this was a good idea or not, but doctors insisted it was the right decision. Once I was at the other hospital, I felt as if I was beginning to gain some strength back, and the second day was one I would never forget. If you haven't seen a hospital meal before, just think of a in-flight dinner, but much worse. That afternoon I was sitting there eating my sausage and mash, which surprisingly tastes amazing, when the guy laying in the bed next to me was approached by a handful of consultants. As I put one of the party-sized shriveled sausages in my mouth, I heard the consultant say, "I'm afraid, sir, we will have to remove 2 of your toes." Just as I was biting down onto that sausage, I turned my head. I turned my head, and right in front of my eyes were the gentleman's crusty toes. You may be surprised to hear that I did not end up finishing that meal. Later that afternoon, my mum and dad called to say they were on their way to see me. And straight after the phone call, the doctors came and told me that they felt as if I was ready to go home. I could not believe what I had just been... I could not believe what I was being told. I was filled with joy knowing that I would be going back to the comfort and safe haven of my home. As soon as my parents arrived, they could tell I was super excited, so I instantly told them, "I'm allowed to go home." They both stood there and looked at me with completely confused looks on their faces. Again I repeated, "I'm allowed to go home." I remember my mum giggling and saying, you're nowhere near ready to go home, you're confused." But I wasn't confused at all, so I told them again. In the end, my mum called over a nurse and said to them, "Ryan thinks he's allowed to go home," to which the nurse replied to her amazement, "He is." The nurse said, "When do you want to go home, Ryan?" And I replied with, "Right now." There and then I packed up my belongings and left the hospital, taking the crutches with me for support. I remember walking through that cold car park where we all stopped and cuddled. We cried and my dad said, "You're coming home, back where you belong." This was just in time for Christmas the month after, and it was the best Christmas present me and my parents could have ever asked for. Okay, my friends, I'm going to end it there on that one. Make sure you join me for the next one, whenever that will be, I don't know, in a couple of days' time, so look out for it. You can watch this back on replay. There's some more that I've done recently as well that you can re-watch on replay if you want a sneak insight or sneak peek of the book before it even comes out, as I'm editing it here live. If anyone wants to get on the wait list, make sure you go and join dyingwithregrets.ryannurse.com. Send me a DM, just say I'd like to get on the wait list. I'll sort you out, I'll hook you up with that. So yeah, if you want to get on the wait list, dyingwithregrets.ryannurse.com. Thank you so much, my friends. Peace out. See you on the next one. Bye bye.